Hi, welcome or welcome back. In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the things I wish I knew in hindsight and some things I would do differently. This is a little bit hard to talk about because I think we don't like to admit that we made mistakes. First thing that I want to talk about is money. Growing up in a low income household, I think I made some money choices that weren't the best. One thing that I would definitely do differently if I had a time machine is to invest my money earlier in the stock market. And when I say stock market, I am talking about index funds, something like the S&P 500. If you're in the United States, we have something called the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index. So things like that. I'm not sure if you heard of compound growth, but that is definitely something I would advise you to look into if you aren't already. I actually started working part-time in high school, and rather than investing my money and saving that away, because I didn't have a lot of money and I didn't get allowance, I actually didn't realize allowance was a real thing. I spent a lot of it on just frivolous spending. I mean, I think eating is really important. Some of the purchases that might be a little excessive was some luxury handbags. I purchased some Coach handbag, and I went to the outlet mall, bought clothing during the Black Friday sales. I'm in the United States. I'm not sure if other countries have this, but it's pretty big in the United States. Right now, I'm not a huge spender on material items. I realized that material goods would not make me happy and would not fulfill me. But because I grew up in a lower income household, I thought that would make me happy because I never had it. And once I did have a little bit of money, right, I worked part-time and hourly, so I didn't make a lot. It was so funny. I was looking at the website that shows how much income we have, because we actually have a website in the United States that shows us the taxes that we paid. And I was thinking, wow, if I had put that in the stock market today, I would have so much more money. And this actually brings me to talk about compound interest. And I'm really grateful for one of my finance professors who actually taught us about this in our finance class. This professor, I remember his name was Steve, and Steve was really cool. He actually worked in corporate America for a number of years. I'm not sure if he worked on Wall Street. He was great because he took some time out of one of our classes, and this was not part of the curriculum. We don't really learn this in America, unfortunately. He showed us a graph of what compound interest and how compound growth is. It really cemented in my mind. Of course, at the time I already purchased those expensive materials, and I unfortunately don't have it to this day, but lesson learned. There's something called the compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, of the stock market, and when adjusted for inflation from 1923 to 2023, there is a return of 7.42%. What I would do differently is I would invest at least a minimum of $1,000 per year. And I did the math, and it came out to, if I did that for 15 years, I would have a total of more than $25,000, almost $26,000, and a little bit less than 11,000 of that is interest earned. So I put in 15,000, but I'll get 11,000. That is a huge return. Again, I mentioned that this is adjusted for inflation. I do want to say I'm not a financial advisor, so please just take this as my own lessons and you can do your own research. Anyway, so what I want to say is he showed us graphs of two people and how if you start investing earlier, your money will grow and make you more money.
To illustrate the magic of compound interest, I found a great article that I'll also link below for you to review if you'd like to look at that. Link is in the description. If you scroll down, you'll notice that there are two scenarios, and I want to talk about scenario number 2. So you'll see here that it says 25-year-old Carolina and 45-year-old Andy each saved $30,000 over a period of 20 years. For the first 10 years, they saved $1,000 annually. For the second 10 years, they each saved $2,000 annually. In this example, we'll assume a 6% annual return, and they made contributions at year end. In this scenario, Carolina starts saving at age 25 and stops at age 44. Andy starts at 45 and stops at 64. Even though they save the same amount of money and earn the same rate of return, their earnings are different. When Carolina turns 65, she'll have $110,000 more in her nest egg than Andy did when he turned 65. In total, Carolina ends up with $160,300, while Andy ends up with $49,970. You'll notice in this example the magic of compounding, of compound interest. Because Carolina started earlier, she was able to have her money make more money. In order for Andy to catch up, he would need to save more than 3 times as much as Carolina to end up with the same size because he started a little later. This is a great example to demonstrate how it's so important to start investing and saving earlier. if you haven't started yet, it's never too late. Definitely a great thing to know and to start doing. I hope this has been helpful.
I want to share this because this has helped me, and although I didn't start when I was in my high school years, I did start investing quickly after having my first job out of college and taking advantage of the company match. In America, we have something called a 401k match. Unfortunately, we don't have pensions as often here in the United States, but if you have that, that's great. I definitely do encourage you. Please learn from me, invest sooner, and help make your money grow. Again, I'm not a financial advisor, but this has really helped me, and please do your own research. In hindsight, I would definitely do that a little differently, not buy those bags, but lesson learned, and I think that I learned so much, and I'm barely doing well, though no regrets there, but something that I think is difficult to talk about, but really important. Financial education is so important. Moving topics, I think another thing that is fresh on my mind is, I mentioned in another video, but my partner and I did purchase a home. It's been a very rough process doing so. If you are in the United States, you know our interest rates are pretty high right now. Something that I would have done differently is firing my realtor sooner than I actually did. I think that for myself, I give people a lot of the benefit of the doubt, and I think through this experience, I realized I really need to trust myself and my gut. I think at one point when my old realtor was being really pushy, I should have saw that as a sign and a red flag to move on. But I think because, like I mentioned, I do give people the benefit of the doubt. I give people chances, and I think it's so important not to mix kind of our personal feelings with a business transaction, right? And of course, you can be friendly with your realtor. I think I was just kind of in the mindset of, no, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I don't want to assume anything. Maybe let's give them a chance. I made a decision later than I would have liked to. I learned so much from the house buying experience. I will say, just to give you some details, my realtor at the time we fired was really pushy, and there were just some things I let go because I like to see the good in a lot of people. I think if someone is not a nice or respectful person, they can really take advantage of that. One example I'll give you is that at the time, schedules weren't aligning, and there was a house that we actually were interested in, but because our realtor at the time was going on vacation, they weren't available to show us the house, and they didn't have a backup. My partner at the time was traveling for a work trip. The realtor was really pushy and tried to push me to see the house myself, although they were aware that it was a joint decision. So that was really frustrating. Ultimately, when we did put an offer in another house, we felt like the realtor didn't have our best interests and was advising us some weird things. So one example is that they actually tried to convince us to waive inspections. And if you're kind of newer to the home buying experience, inspections are something that you typically have so you can check out the house. You hire your inspector, your home inspector, and they'll just take a look at it. It could be several hours. I believe our inspector spends about 3 to 4 hours looking at the house. They'll provide a report, but the realtor at the time actually tried to convince us to forgo the inspection so then we could kind of make that sale, I guess, which was silly because we're not stupid. But anyways, back to the story. Just things like that. After the house didn't work out, he was really pushy, even though the seller was not willing to work with us. We didn't take the realtor's advice to forgo the inspection, and what we ended up doing was we had that in the contract course, and we tried to negotiate with the seller, but the seller at the time didn't want to. We just felt like the realtor didn't have our best interest because he wasn't working with us, and rather than being like a partnership, it just felt like he was like a mouthpiece, and he's also friendly with the other seller, which was also a realtor. So that was a very complicated, weird thing. Long story short, should have fired a realtor sooner and learned so much from that. Did find a new realtor who one of my coworkers used, so that was really cool, and we love this new realtor, and of course we did purchase the house. It worked out. That was one thing that I think I wish in hindsight I did sooner. And what's so funny is like my partner actually was talking to me that it was my decision if I wanted to make a change, and he actually saw coming that perhaps it wasn't gonna work out. Anyways, hindsight's 2020. differently, and let's move on from that story now. I think another thing that in hindsight I wish I'd done differently is, I think in the past when I was really young, I would take a lot of advice from other people, and I thought that it was really helpful to seek that advice because people have more experience. I recently kind of came to terms with that people will give you their opinion or advice based on their own experience. So all size does not fit and everyone is an individual. What I realized was I sought mentorship from one of my earlier managers from a job I had, like my first job. And this person actually was very typical of in the boomer generation who stayed at companies for a very long time. And I remember when I was going through a lot of work dilemmas and situations, their advice to me was always, you should do your time and try to make it work. At the time, the company wasn't doing so well financially, and their advice to me was like, I should stay and make that work through that. I realized in hindsight that they gave me that feedback because that's based on their own experience. They've stayed at jobs for like 10, maybe 15 years, and that's what they were used to. Hadn't realized I had my own set of criteria of like what I'm comfortable with. I'm a little bit more risk averse, and I don't like waiting around to see if a company may lay me off. That was definitely a little different, and I guess it's always cool to ask for advice, but also your own perspectives too, and maybe get a more broad opinion. So definitely that's another thing in hindsight I would do differently. And speaking of managers, I want to talk about a more positive thing, and I hope you learn from this if this is something that maybe you're going through. I think that the grass may always look greener, and it may not always be. I had a really awesome manager that I worked with in a few jobs ago, and we still keep in touch to this day. And I think the thing that I've learned recently going through some work challenges and things like that is that it's so easy to take for granted what you have in front of you and to kind of think about what is next. I think that you cannot put a price on a relationship and the working relationship you have with someone else. You work so closely, 8 hours or more with your work people and your manager, so it's so important. So something that in hindsight I would have stayed a little longer in that position, and I think that while I don't regret moving jobs because I learned so much about myself, I think that is definitely something I look at now for the future of that relationship with other folks. I think it's so easy to overlook the situation and other people, but definitely appreciate and be grateful for what's in front of you because you don't know what's on the other side. And I think that's something that in hindsight I would do a little differently, but I don't regret it because I've learned so much about myself and about other people. Lastly, I want to talk about stepping away from uncomfortable conversations, unhealthy relationships, toxic conversations. I think that is something that I'm working on. When I'm in this really uncomfortable situation, you've probably heard of, you either have flight or freeze, and I think I have a little bit of both. But when I'm confronted with someone who is raising their voice at me, speaking to me improperly, I have a tendency to freeze. I've learned recently that it's okay to walk away from somebody if they are being disrespectful and unprofessional. I think it's hard for me because growing up, I didn't have that ability to walk away. I think in Asian culture, in Chinese culture specifically, because I am Chinese American, that we're taught to just kind of listen and filial piety and respecting your elders is really important. So I never had the ability to walk away when I am spoken to in a disrespectful or unfair manner. So I think I brought that with me when I am in the working world. Even in personal relationships, I think it's so important to put yourself first. So if someone is being really disrespectful, rude, it is okay to take yourself out of that situation. I know it's hard, but I was so proud of myself because recently I had a situation where someone was raising their voice and being really disrespectful and inappropriate, saying really rude and just inappropriate things to me, and I actually stopped the conversation and I said, hey, this is inappropriate. The way you're speaking to me is not okay, and that's not okay. I was so proud of myself, but what I think I would do differently in the future is I will calmly tell them that right now I don't think the conversation is productive, which I did, but I didn't shut the conversation. I didn't know I could do that. In hindsight, I would have walked away and said, this conversation is not productive right now. If you have anything you want to share with me, please share with me via text or an email, and thank you so much. Bye-bye. or I don't have to say thank you, but you know what I mean. Those are some of the things that I would have done differently if I had known better. But I think I also want to preface that if I had not gone through these situations, I would not have known how to interact and deal with them. So I don't regret what happened, but definitely learn from my mistakes, learn from the things that I went through, and I hope this helps you. Let me know if there are some things that you would do differently, and if you relate to anything I've shared, if you agree or disagree. I really hope this was helpful. If you made it this far, please give me a thumbs up. And if you aren't subscribed, I hope you subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. I typically don't talk about things like this because I think it's really hard and vulnerable, but this was a great question. So thank you so much, Andy, for sharing this question with me. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know any comments below, any questions, any ideas of things that you might want me to talk about. I'll consider them for any future videos. With all that being said, I know I talked a lot, so thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you again, and see you soon. Bye.